Welcome to the Mobile App Chat Podcast. I am your host, Steve P. Young, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about all the top news in mobile, and I've got two awesome friends of mine joining me to discuss the topics. Charles McKeever of Open Source Marketer. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
And Roderick Andrews. Roderick, I don't know what your company. I can't say your company name, so why don't you say it for us?
Mobile App Chat Podcast. I am your host, Steve P. Young.
Oh no.
And we're going to do.
Does somebody have it open? If you have it open in a different tab.
I do have it open, but it's gone now. Roderick, I can't hear you, my friend.
Oh, he put his headset on. Now we can't hear.
I know. This is a problem doing it live. I like to record things. This is why I don't do it live.
No, this is the beauty. This is the live. This is organic, man. It doesn't get any more authentic than this.
Might be a technical fiasco, or we can pull through. Yeah, my name is Roderick Andrews, and our company is called Lixow, and we do mobile apps, and we help entrepreneurs to market their apps, and we help them with startups, and we're based in Paris.
Cool. Yeah, we've got folks everywhere now. So let's start with the news. I actually want to open with this. I got an email from a listener of mine, Keith, and he said, Steve, a couple of podcasts ago, you were drinking wine, and that was one of the best episodes I've heard from you. And so he said, your tone and delivery were very calm compared to usual. I'm like, I need some wine, but it's too early. It's 10 o'clock Pacific time. But thanks for that.
I'll get some wine for you here. Don't worry. 7 o'clock here. I don't feel so bad.
So guys, let's start with the first news. The Next Web comes out with this news. This gesture-controlled iPhone camera app simplifies selfies. It's just a little plug for OSnap, but it's like OSnap, for those who are curious, was featured on the Next Web, and I didn't know if that would happen or not, but Paul Sawyers, I guess that's how you say it, but thank you, Paul, for writing that. But yeah, OSnap's out, and it was cool to see it on the Next Web.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Man, I use it.
Yep. I have it installed here.
You didn't even know it was yours, Steve.
I think the biggest news for me on my end is the fact of iPhone 6. Now, there's been rumors that it's going to come out in the fall, and the rumors have been that the screen size is actually going to grow from 3.5 inches to from 4 inches from the iPhone 5 to 4.7 inches for the iPhone 6. Now, personally, for me as a developer, like I hate the fact that it grows, because then that means I have to update my apps and update the graphics. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on what you think the iPhone 6 will entail, and then the fact that they are going to a bigger size.
Well, we don't know yet. We don't actually know if it's going to be a different format altogether. But I'm guessing, we don't know anything really, but I'm guessing, and a lot of us here are thinking, probably what they'll do is they'll keep the same aspect ratio as the 4. And hopefully just enlarge that. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to go down the same path, and I'm really hoping that they're going down the same path as Android and have multiple aspect ratios. I don't know what you think, Charles.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the article on 9 to 5 Mac, but I think that they're kind of spot on in this idea that they're going to scale it to an aspect ratio that's the same as it's always been.
Right.
The only concern there may be pixel density and whether or not it'll actually match up to previous generations. But I think it makes a lot of sense just to scale it to the point where all the developers have to do is keep doing what they're doing and then just scale their graphics.
Effectively, it'll be the same aspect ratio as the iPad as well. So it would make sense if they did that. And
is it the same aspect ratio as the iPhone 5? So we just have to scale it to...
It'll be the same aspect ratio as the 4, because obviously it's going to be... overall, it's going to be more square, right? It's going to be much bigger. Because if you do the same aspect ratio as a 5, then you've got a brick on your hands. So I'm guessing, right? I just think that if you had that width and if you went tall to make the same aspect ratio as a 5, it'd be enormous. So let's hope it's more like the iPad and the 4.
Yeah, I like it.
No, but it just makes sense. I think. I saw somebody make reference to the fact that, oh great, we're going down the path that Android's experiencing with all these different screen sizes and stuff. And I don't think that's necessarily a fair comparison, because companies like Samsung are just flooding the market with devices, trying to figure out what works best, and that's fine. It's a scattershot approach, and then they're going to focus in on the things that do the best. meanwhile, I think Apple's just taking a much more moderate approach and scaling things up, and actually probably even watching what Samsung's doing and learning from their lessons, and that's going to create a certain number of form factors. But I don't think that, over time we're not going to have the classic iPhone size, right? Those devices will eventually fall off, and the larger phablet types devices will rule. So even though we have maybe 2 or 3 different sizes that we have to deal with, I don't think that it'll last for very long, and I don't think that's as big of a deal as the hundreds or maybe even thousands of different devices that are out there for Android.
Well, I think that's true, and I think they probably, in a lot of ways, Apple either innovate or they just sit back. Similar to is it called NFC, the Near Field Communications? Mm-hmm. They deliberately sat back on that, and there's rumors that that's finally going to move forward. Probably not exactly that technology, but they've waited to see what worked the best. So I think I think it's interesting is that I kind of figured that within a year or two the whole iPhone 4 aspect ratio would be gone, and I think they're actually, obviously, if this goes the way we think, then there will be 2 main aspect ratios. I'd be very surprised if they add a third. So I think they've been smart, right? They just sat back and watched, and now they're making a move.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Apple was the iPhone was the initial leader in that category, right? Creator of the category space, and so they kind of set that standard. They haven't deviated much from that, and now I think it's time to move to something that's bigger. Like the phablet. I love my iPhone 5, but I can tell you if they didn't go to a bigger screen size, I probably would be looking at Android just based on form factor alone, not based on apps or software or ecosystem or anything like that, but just based on screen real estate. I want a bigger screen, and I think that that's what they're trying to do in this next version.
I didn't like the bigger screen. I was like, why do I need all this room? And then when you get used to the 5, you're like, and then you go down to the 4S or the 4, you're like, this is tiny. Like I love the fact, but I don't want to get too big because I have a S4. That thing is humongous. Like I could barely hold it in my hand without like slipping off.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair comparison too. And if you look at iPad, when the iPad came out, it was great. It was again another kind of revolutionary kind of device, but it was too big to actually type on. You couldn't bring your thumbs together. You couldn't really get a handle on the device. What's that?
You couldn't hold on to it with one hand. That was
you couldn't hold on to it with one hand. And then some devices came out. Like the Nexus came out. And here was some Android devices where your thumbs could come together. You could hold it with one hand. You could put it in your pocket. If you wanted to. And that was a great experience. And so then the iPad Mini came out, and it was a much more comfortable experience. And even the recent versions that they've come out with are a little even better. And I think that's what people want. People want to be able to use these things. And I think it's almost like they're dialing it in, dialing into that sweet spot that satisfies most people.
I'll never go back to the full-size iPad. I think the Mini is spot on. And again, they waited and they measured their response, right? So. Yeah.
The iPad Mini is a device that you can actually sit up and read in bed, or if you want to lay down and read, and you can do that without your arm getting tired. And I carried it in my bag. Ever since I got my iPad Mini, it's pretty much the kids, they've become the owners of the iPad. They like to use it, and it's a good size for them. But I don't care for it anymore. And I think the same thing is going to hold true, like I said, for these other smaller devices. Once we get to something that's more of an iPhone 5 or an iPhone 6 realm of things, people are going to there's going to be some division there as to which ones people like, and then everything else will just fall away.
Yeah. So let's move on to a topic that, Charles, I know you're very passionate about. And you were talking about why Amazon is beating Google and Apple at cloud. And talk to me about the roadshow or the meetup that you went to.
Yeah, so Amazon is doing this thing that's called Roadshow, and they're going to city, basically introducing people to Amazon Cloud. And I went to the Austin Roadshow, and they showed all their services there, everything from cloud computing to cloud storage, to be able to do mail or load balancing between servers and all this other stuff. And if you look at the space right now, everybody talks about cloud, but cloud isn't cloud. They're not equal, and they're not the same offerings. But cloud is very important because it's a long-term strategy for those companies. So give you a good example. Apple has music, they have movies, they have books, they have all these things. But their cloud backend is not all that great. They have iCloud, but it's been out for a few years now, and it's really not that big of a deal. It's more of a way to sync your devices. It's almost a Dropbox for your devices, right? So that your iPad and your iPhone and your Mac can kind of all be connected together. But when you think about cloud, you want cloud where you can do computing, and you can do cloud storage, and you can do all these different things. And so right now it's important. Cloud is important for companies like Amazon and Google and Apple, because they're trying to get devices that are in the home and that are on your phone, that are in your car, and all of that is storing data someplace, and it's delivering services, and it's doing all these different things. Well, Apple should be in that space, but isn't. I mean, really, they're not. They have a iCloud, but like we said, it doesn't do very much apart from the Dropbox for your information. There's really no API, open API, or push for developers to develop against. The Google is finally kind of opening up their own network and inviting people in, but even that is kind of a secondary thought to what Google's primary job is. And then Amazon, on the other hand, has been in this space for 8 years. I think it's 8 years. I think that's what they said. And it's a whole separate company. A lot of people think that Amazon Cloud, or Amazon Web Services, is just extra space, unutilized space from Amazon, the company. But it started out that way, but that's not what it is today. Today, it's a whole separate company, whole separate set of services. They're targeting a whole different crowd of people, going after public government services, going after commercial space, all that kind of stuff. And they have an API, and they have all these tools for being able to spin up a server, and being able to develop systems, and being able to clone those systems and load balance them, and be able to store data, and be able to send email messages. I mean, it was just amazing to see everything that they had available at that roadshow.
What is it like for the mobile stuff though? Like, how can I use? I'm not a geek, and I'm like, this is way over my head. But how can I apply this to my apps or anything like that?
Well, okay. So how this applies to apps is that, let's say that you wanted to create a leaderboard, right? Let's say that Apple's leaderboard isn't all that great, or maybe you don't want to use it, or maybe you want the Android guys to play against the iOS guys. And so you want that public information to be public, and you want it to be something where they can interact with each other. Well, you can set up your own independent leaderboard on something like an Amazon service, and then have the iOS guys and the Android guys play against each other in your game. And it's very inexpensive to be able to do that. I mean, 10 years ago, if I wanted to buy a server and set it up and get it all plugged in and get up and running on something, it was going to cost me thousands of dollars. Especially if you wanted to have 2 servers and you wanted to have a load balancer, and you wanted to really be able to have this thing where if one server failed, it would fall over to the other server and keep things up and running. That would be hugely expensive. Today, it's all on a pay-per-use basis, and it's pennies per hour, which adds up to dollars per month. And you can experiment, and you can develop, and you can share, and you can grow something. And then you couldn't have done that 10 years ago. And so, from an app development perspective, we think a lot about our information being on our device. We think about our application being on our device, but there's really no reason why it can't be. The device is the input and output mechanism, but all the data and all the processing and other activities are out in the cloud.
You got anything to add, Robert? I know your mic's mute.
No, I'm listening attentively. I'm learning.
I tell you,
I guess
I tell you, well,
that in terms of, I mean, they've always been promising. There was a great book called Everywhere, which was all about the idea of having very very low processor demanding devices which connected to the cloud. And I guess they were talking about that kind of thing 5-6 years ago. So I guess what you're saying is that it can come to fruition for a lower price than before. So maybe it's actually going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. It's really becoming, give you a good example. There's a lot of campaigns that are starting up on Kickstarter. Like there's one called Tiled, and Tiled does this thing. It's a plastic, basically a plastic tile. It's got a hole in it. You can latch it onto your bag, or you can stick it onto the back of a laptop, or whatever. And with Tiled, you can figure out where your object is in the room. So it'll either give you sort of a beacon on your phone that you can follow to figure out, kind of like warmer, getting colder, that kind of thing. Or you can make it do an audible sound that you can then track down and find. If you can't find your device, if you can't find your object in the room, then you can mark it as lost, and then it'll send out this broadcast, and other people who have it, it'll crowdsource it to figure out if it's nearby somebody else, and if it is, then it'll send you a signal back to let you know where that object is. So, once you kind of open it up and say, okay, yes, I can create a mobile device that an individual can use, but if you can create an application that a crowd can use, then you can kind of leverage the power of the aggregate, as opposed to having that one app. And those types of utilities make things a lot more practical, a lot more useful than just creating an Angry Bird app.
For sure, and I think that's the fact that apps like QuizUp and that apps like FunRun, which really don't offer any significantly more interesting gameplay than that's been done before. The reason they're so successful is because of this idea of really tapping into each other, and it's not exactly the same thing, but there's obviously a massive appetite for now really sort of crossing over into each other's gameplay and not just playing on your own. So maybe it will be the future. Well, it's one of those things where we tend to, and I hate to quote Bill Gates, but in one of his books, I think it was The Speed of Thought, or Information at the Speed of Thought, he talked about the fact that we kind of overthink, or we overestimate how impactful something will be, and so we say, like, the Twitter is going to change the world, okay, and so that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for that to happen. So we kind of jump on it and see these possibilities right away, but it takes time for things to ramp up and for infrastructure to be there and for adoption and all these different pieces to fall into play. And then it does change the world. It changes the world over time. And then what happens, though, is that while we're waiting for all those things to for like you say, that promise to be delivered, we kind of get distracted and go look for other shiny objects, right? So we start. That's what sucks about being an early adopter, right? It's expensive, and you don't see the real fruit until 10 years later. It's so true.
Yeah, exactly. But what happens, though, is that so we go off and we kind of forget about it, and then when we come back, we realize that, oh, well, you know what? The future is here, right? It's already arrived, but we're not paying attention anymore because we're early adopters and we've moved on to something else.
Yeah, and when grandma gets on Viber and you realize, okay, we're here.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so, things like Uber, things like Airbnb, things like, all these different companies who have kind of embraced cloud as early adopters, they went in when it wasn't as easy to understand how things were set up. Right, there was a lot of legwork and a lot of technical expertise that were involved in order to be able to utilize those services. But now, at the Amazon Roadshow, we set up 2 servers and load balanced them off of a PDF instructions, and it took about 10 minutes. You know, you created one server, you installed some services on it, you cloned that server to make a whole separate server, you set up basically these two separate zones with different IP addresses and everything, and then you set up a load balancer and you load balanced it, and then you made that load balancer publicly available, and then you could sit there and you could watch it flip back and forth between servers. And it was a 10-minute job, which, you know, like I said, 10 years ago would have taken thousands of dollars and would have taken hours worth of time to do. And one of the other things that the guy did at the roadshow was he took and in front of everybody, he spun up 60 different instances of server. And while he was talking, he hit the go button and he's talked about some other things. And in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, he had 60 instances of a server running up on the screen. And so in order to understand what that means is, you know, think about having 60 physical computers all plugged into 60 outlets with 60 keyboards and 60 monitors and 60 mice, you know, and having to boot them up and get them running, you know, in a physical space. It's very labor intensive, very time intensive, and very expensive. But here, you can do it, you know, in the cloud from one computer in about 2 minutes, and just pay per pennies per hour.
And what do you think the impact of Facebook buying Oculus is going to be? I mean, clearly Facebook are realizing that everyone's running away from their platform. They're afraid, and you know, they've made a really interesting purchase. And if you combine that with what you're talking about, with all this cloud power. You know, I saw an Oculus demonstration which was quite amazing, where the guy was, someone would pretend it was him, and he would actually have the sensation that he was in someone else's body, and of course it was a female body, and he could touch himself, and she was right next to him, and it was more of an artistic experiment, but you can imagine that on a cloud-based system, and you can come up with some pretty crazy stuff. I wonder what Facebook are up to.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's interesting to see Google Glass come out, you know, and have that aspect of things. Oculus,
States can buy it now, right?
What's that?
That's the next bit of news.
Yeah.
So Google will now sell Glass to anyone in the U.S. who wants to buy it. So this is what a TechCrunch article was surprising. I'll quote it because I kind of like it. With surprising little fanfare, Google has gone ahead and opened up Google Glass sales to anyone and everyone in the U.S. indefinitely. If you got $1,500 to spend and the desire, Google is down to sell you a pair of Robo glasses until they run out of stock. You guys getting one?
I'm not in the States.
That's right.
I don't.
Roderick, if you're interested.
What do you guys think? Do you think that they're just trying to get rid of inventory?
I think. Sorry, Steve.
It seems silly to be wearing it around. I don't know. Every time I see somebody, I'm just like, really? Like, I would be embarrassed to wear this around town.
Because we touched on something a moment ago, which is, you know, we're just waiting for it. It takes 10 years, early adoption, etc. The one thing we didn't really mention, which is painfully true for some things when you go down the wrong path, is that sometimes the public just doesn't pick up, and it'll never go anywhere. I'm not saying that'll happen to Glass, but it's clear that they've got some until they get it down to a size which, or at least an appearance in which you can't really see that it's Google Glass, right. It can have problems. And then there's a problem if you can hide Google Glass, then am I now a pervert?
As long as it doesn't have X-ray, I think it's okay. But I would love to see a sunglasses version of Google Glass. That's something that I would actually wear, like, you know, and looks cooler than just normal glasses with a little camera on the right-hand side.
You know, I think there's a greater underlying conversation going on here. I don't know if you guys remember back in the early days of the internet when there was all these commercials about how the internet was going to change the world and how you needed to have your business online because there were all these people clamoring to your front door. And you know, do you remember the iconic commercial where the guy there's people all sitting around this one guy at the computer, and they put their website online, and then all of a sudden they're like getting 1 order and 2 order and 10 orders, and they're like, yeah, this is great, and everybody's happy and clapping, and then they get like these the ticker just kind of goes spinning, and they start getting thousands of orders, and they're like, oh no, what are we going to do now? You know, we can't support all that, right? At that same time, there were these commercials where the guy was sitting out in public space, and he was wearing glasses, and he was talking to his glasses, right? He was watching stock sell, buy stock, whatever, and I think it's funny to look back on that now, because we were almost kind of told that stuff existed, and it didn't exist, right? It was futuristic kind of fanfare kind of stuff, and now we have Google Glass, and everybody's kind of like, they don't know how to feel about it. So I think the more important part is to recognize that if you think an idea already exists, be sure to look into it, because maybe it doesn't already exist.
There's heaps of examples of that. You go back through movie history, for example. You have television shows where we're all walking. The Jetsons is a cartoon. It's not about whether we can do it. It's whether people want it and they want to accept it. As a graphic designer, I'm noticing all the time this kickback to retro design, this kickback constantly, this kickback to the olden days. I remember seeing a handcrafted wooden iPhone case, and I mean that there's a lot of contradictions there, but I think it speaks to the idea that we're not always just going to take something just because it's novel. It has to fit in with us, and that's the big point.
Yeah. There's definitely a concern. People are concerned about their privacy and things like that. And
I live in France. I mean, they're hanging on for dear death. There's no way that things move forward here unless that it's widely accepted. And there's something nice about that in the old world in Europe, whereby when I pay my taxes, I pay it with paper. There's still, unless it's really really beneficial. I don't think things necessarily go forward. It has to be more than just innovation.
Yeah.
Steve, to your point, I think I think it's just odd looking. Having this this lopsided one-sided thing that hangs off your glasses just doesn't. I think that the form factor doesn't appeal to people.
Yeah, I think that's just it. If you could, I think the idea is cool, but if you could make it look cooler, like a Terminator-style sunglasses, I think people would adopt it. I can see Roderick wearing that for sure.
Well, and to Roderick's point, I think that needs to have. There's not a killer app. It needs a real practical application that drives people in that direction, opposed rather than just the fact that we can do it.
And I've had to think about that. I for a moment we were thinking, hey, should we get into this space? Clearly, they're going to need a few apps, and we all know that Apple, if you were in there early back in 2007, then you're a made man. It was a gold rush. But there must be some great apps. For example, cooking. I mean, apart from the obvious perverted things you could come up with, I mean, obviously there's some really practical uses. If you're pulling apart a car, it'd be pretty nice to have a plan on your left-hand side, or imagine putting some IKEA stuff together. God damn, I need that app. I love IKEA, but I still can't get it, right? So there's some really practical applications, but when it comes down to it, walking around on the street and communicating, interacting with your wife and that, I can't see it.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Is there a platform that you guys are excited about? I mean, I've been kind of looking at Amazon Fire TV, but I don't know. I don't know whether to start developing on it or not, because it's like completely different from all the other mobile type of games that you've built, because there's a real controller now, right? Like now I'm like confused. Like, what kind of gameplay can we put on with the controller too?
I really haven't looked into it. Why is it so different?
Because you have a controller now. You can't just. It's not like a touch screen. So like if you were building for Kindle, it's all touch screen and you can tap. Now it's just a literal back into the Nintendo days of having a controller in your hand and then maneuvering that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's basically a console concept for mobile apps. Almost. I mean, there's other tools that have come out who have tried to do this, and I think that they're still relegated to the geeky or the gamer or the kids who are really motivated by it. But like our Xbox, it serves as our portal to Netflix and YouTube and games and playing DVDs and all that stuff like that. So while Fire TV is an interesting device to me, I already have a device that does that. So I think it's going to have to come down to personal preference as to whether or not you already have something that gives you access to all those services or not.
Could you see like Flappy Bird working on Fire TV? I mean, we're just pressing the button.
What's that?
Could you see like a Flappy Bird working on Amazon Fire TV?
Yeah, I could see that. Why wouldn't it? I mean, you just have to use the controller. You just have to. All you have to do is map the touch inputs that you would normally have on the device to the keyboard, or not the keyboard, the key inputs, like the controller inputs. Yeah. So instead, rather than tap tap tap, you're just AAA, whatever the button is.
Right, but then now I don't know if it's boring, right? Like you're just tapping AAA, whereas the phone feels okay because it's in your hand, but now you're like, screen, just pressing AAA.
I don't think it's an instant win, right? Not everybody can take their app and just port it over to a different form factor and make it work. Right. But things like a Fire TV would lend itself more to a social game, where you might be able to play in your living room with other people. Whereas a mobile device is typically you on a device. Possibly you're playing with other people out there in the cloud, but it's a solo device. Whereas a Fire TV can be more of a community device, or it can still be a one-on-one type thing. But I don't think it's a natural win that you can just convert your app to Fire TV. That being said, a lot of people have had good success on hitting a platform early before it fills up with other players.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right, so that's all I'm looking at too.
So it would be worth doing. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But, so even though people didn't have a lot of success, people had a lot of success with what was it? Not Kindle. What was the other one? Barnes and Noble. What was that?
Nook.
Nook. Sorry, I always Nook didn't have a big market share. Still doesn't, but people were able to get in there early, and because there was a community, because there were people who were buying apps and things like that, they were able to make money off of it. So it may not last forever, and it may not be a very big market, but it's worth trying.
The thing that's exciting, I bought one, and you get, I think it was 1,000 or 1,500 credits, which is I think $150, and so I'm like, yeah, I'm just spending money on a bunch of different things, and I'm like, as a developer, I'm like, oh, I should just try to get in on this while everybody has these free coins to kind of play with. Just get in on it. I don't know. That's what I've been thinking about.
We had a friend's company recently get paid 40,000 euros, from Windows to change their app is quite popular, and to make it for the Windows format. So there's obviously a big will and a big desire for these guys to get some big name apps onto these platforms, and obviously if they're giving away free credits, there's a lot of will, and as long as there's a lot of will from the company, then who knows how far they'll go for it, and so maybe it will be a success. You never know.
Yeah, I think
the reviews too. I mean, there's some games that have, like Minecraft has over 1,000+ reviews or whatever.
Well, here's the thing to remember about the different app stores. Apple is the original app store, okay? And then Google, and then there's Amazon. The thing to remember about Amazon, though, is that they're the king of distribution. They're the king of, hey, other people bought this, or hey, you might like this, and that recommendation engine that is there, and we already have your credit card, and it's only a one-tap, purchase. I mean, that kind of thing. Google kind of falls behind in that space, and so does Apple. And Amazon, they have everything they gain from people adopting this digital credits. Having this disconnect between your money and actual credits, because once the further and further you get away from the actual physical money, the more abstract it becomes, and the easier it is to spend.
Monopoly money. It's like visiting another country.
Right.
I was in Budapest last weekend. Spent that stuff like Monopoly money.
That's exactly
I guess the last thing that I think we should probably cover is the fact that, I mean, this is everywhere. So Apple buys Beats, and there's this great article that Charles you kind of sent us, but it's the 9 possible outcomes. So what do you guys think of Apple buying Beats?
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I
don't get it.
I was
You don't like
shocked.
it?
Well, I think the masters are coming up with at surprises, and then later on, I mean, there's heaps of stuff they've bought as well, which never came to fruition. So I'd love to know where this one's going.
I think I'm most surprised by the price. I'm most surprised by the price. You know, the fact that they wanted to buy somebody else is kind of uncharacteristic of Apple. It's something that they either rarely do or haven't done before, and usually everything's built in-house and all that kind of stuff like that. All those different kinds of conversations, and I get it. But if you have something that's truly great and it matches your core values as a company, then yes, buying it is an easy decision. But for the amount of money that they're buying it for, I mean, what is it? I don't even remember how much, like billion, couple billion. I mean, when you start getting, it just seems like it's amazing. So that makes me ask the question of what is it that they're really buying? Are they buying brand recognition? Are they buying technology? Or are they buying like license agreements and patents and that kind of stuff? You know, are you buying a customer list? Are you buying a technology, or are you buying some back-end legal wrangling? And I think they're buying the legal wrangling, because as a part of the deal, as I understand it, there also comes this fledgling streaming business that they have, which, if it's a fledgling business, probably doesn't have that big of a user base, but may have some lucrative agreements, that they can leverage for other things that they want to do. I think that's where the money is.
Yeah, I think the streaming part makes much more sense. I can't see why they would just buy a consumer product like that. I reckon the streaming part has to be an integral factor, and we'll never know until it gets released why.
I love the Times article. It said 9 possible outcomes. Dr. Dre becomes the new voice of Siri. That would be awesome, actually. I love that.
Yeah, that would be funny. But I think that it's one of these. It's kind of crazy. It's one of these things, like you just said, Roderick. I think it's going to be a telling. It's going to be a foretelling when everything shakes out and we understand exactly what's going on. It's either going to show them as being this geniuses at the next big thing, or it's going to be a little bit of the conversation that Apple has lost its way.
But it's interesting that you said before that generally they start in-house and they build a product from the base up. To a large degree, that has changed. I mean, ever since the whole ping debacle, it seems like they've lost a bit of confidence, and certainly they're backing off in a lot of ways. It seems to me. Backing off in terms of innovation. Either they're watching or they're innovating. So it seems to be a kind of binary. And more, maybe they just realize that it makes sense to buy something, because you're not just buying something that's built, you're buying something that people have bought into.
Right.
And that's as they realized with Ping, that was an absolute failure. We didn't even hear when that was when they cut that off. It just sort of disappeared into the background. So maybe that's more of a strategy now, is just to make sure and save time, right? They've got the money, that's the thing.
Right.
Yeah, they're definitely sitting on a mountain of cash that they can use for whatever they want to do, and to some degree, I think maybe you're touching on something there that's interesting, is that if you buy into an existing customer base, and you can interest them then in other products and services that you have, then whatever money that you spent, although it may seem ridiculous up front, if you can make that money back over time, then it was if you make $1 more than what you spent, you made a profit. So
the other thing is that Facebook buying WhatsApp isn't just because it's proven and they've already got a market. It's also because Facebook and Apple are getting to a point where they're pretty much saturated. So they're buying into markets which of people who would never have been interested in their products previously as well. So
yeah,
they have the problem we wish we had, is that they're running out of target market.
Yeah, I went to a meetup group recently, and there was some discussion as to how they were going to organize, coordinate conversations on the back end, and it was funny because somebody brought up Facebook groups, and it just immediately everybody there was, I don't do Facebook. I'm not even on Facebook, and it was just like I was just sitting there going, I kept completely quiet because I am on Facebook and I use Facebook all the time.
Oh no. Yeah.
What's that?
it's kind of like that feeling goes through your head. Oh no, is it uncool now? I've got to
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. Well, but you know, but it was this whole resistance to Facebook, and you think, well, I mean, we hear Facebook all the time, and probably, I mean, if you use Facebook, you probably feel like everybody does, and then when you're sitting in the middle of a crowd of people who don't and who are fervent about not using it, I'm like, okay, well, there you go. So not everybody uses that product, right? So not everybody has an iTunes account. Not everybody has bought apps from Google Play. So there's still opportunity in the market. You just have to reach those people somehow. Influence them in some way to try your stuff.
And maybe the way to do that is to tee it up with Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is there anything else you guys want to cover before we sign off?
I think that's enough for this week. Do we plan to make this a regular thing? I don't
know. What do you guys think? I mean, I want the audience. So to those who are listening out there,
I'm having a good time. Yeah.
Sorry, Keith, I didn't have any wine, but maybe I'll do it later, like a Thursday night, and get some wine. But let me know what you guys think of this. If you want this to be a weekly thing, happy to do that because I think it's kind of fun. But yeah, let me know, the audience, though. What do you guys think? You guys said yeah?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Well,
I'm game.
Let's just see what the audience thinks. I'm up for it, for sure.
Yeah, sounds good. So what I would love from both of you is an app recommendation. Maybe something that's new that's come out, or maybe something that you're like classic that you've been using, but a new one would be preferable just because it's kind of cool and we're always looking for the new thing. While you guys look, I know you're both looking heads down on your apps. I'm gonna give one to everybody.
It's easy for me. I've been using this app for the last 2 weeks.
Okay, go for it.
But it's actually one of the guys you had on before, Steve, although I don't think you talked about it, is the 5by app. I swear by it. It's the best way to waste 20 minutes of time with really, really high quality videos. It's called a video concierge. You just tap in what you feel like, and I can vouch for the app. It's always something worth watching. And it's only available in the States, but I managed to find an American account called 5by.
Nice. The one I got is Refresh. It's kind of cool. So what it does, and Charles, this would be kind of cool for you, as a podcaster, when you have guests, what it'll do is you can connect your social networks, and then you can pull it up and say, like, next Wednesday I'm interviewing a bunch of people, and it'll tell me like how I'm connected to them, what I should talk about with them, all the interact, like the social connections. And so it was really easy for me to just say, oh, okay, Charles is going to be on. I can talk to him about this or that, and we're connected in this way. So Refresh was really cool app that I just heard about.
That's awesome.
Excellent. Well, I actually have more than one. Can I do more than one?
Sure. I was like 12 or something.
No, I've got about 4 of them, though, actually. So my first one will be OSnap.
Thanks, man.
yeah, which is Steve's. Yeah, because I truly enjoy using it, and it has replaced the built-in camera on my iPhone, and it works well, and it does what it's supposed to, and job done. So the other one that I am using is Swell. Now this is a streaming radio app. It's kind of like a Stitcher. I don't know if you've ever used Stitcher before, but it has this card system where you just flick it with a thumb. So you tell it the interests that you have, like business or technology or lifestyle or whatever. It brings in podcasts from those different genres, and then you don't really have to worry about the lineup or what's going to play next. If it's something that you're interested in listening to, then you just listen to it. If not, you just flick your thumb and the card flicks to the next card, and you go from doing BBC to ABC to NPR to mobile app chat to whatever, right? It's just a plethora of content that's out there, and it has 2 buttons for going 30 seconds back and 30 seconds forward. So, for example, Wall Street Journal is notorious about sticking ads into their stuff, which I understand they need to pay for things, with advertisers and stuff. But I can only hear the fitted shirt commercial so many times, right? I'm not going to buy that businessman's fitted shirt, and so I just hit the 30-second skip and I'm done. And
if there's any chance you were going to buy it, it's now gone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you're and this is a whole separate side topic, but here's the thing about advertising is that YouTube has the same problem. If I'm going to buy something, I haven't bought it in the first 10 times that I've seen the commercial. I'm not going to buy it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just done. I'm not buying it. So so it's great to be able to skip those things. The next app that I have is Mile IQ, and this is a mileage tracking application. What you do is you open it and you're done. And so anytime that you go someplace, it tracks that. And then you have two options. You can either categorize it as a business expense or personal expense. And you can add notes to it, and you can do all these different things. But there's no management of the tool. You don't have to start it, stop it, tell it where you're going, all those types of things. It just works in the background, and it doesn't suck battery. I'm using it on the iPhone 5. I leave it open all the time, and it does not impact my battery at all. And the last one is called Moves. It's kind of the same thing. You open it up. You let it run. You don't have to do anything to manage it, and it will keep track of how many steps you take. And if you go running, it'll track how far you ran and how many steps are involved in that as well. And so it gives you sort of metrics over a period of time to show you how active you've been.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool.
I like those.
And those are my faves.
Charles, you just reminded me. I forgot to read my ad. So guys, go if you enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought of the show. But go check out Affordable Dev. They're the one-stop shop for all your app development needs, from marketing to development. They're actually offering a free ASO package, so go check out affordabledev.com. And if you don't mind, if you're looking for some design work, go check out 99designs.com/chat. You get a free power pack of services worth $99. I use the service, both services for OSNAP, so go check them out. I highly recommend each service, and I wouldn't have them as a sponsor if I didn't use them myself. So, Charles, thank you so much. Where can we learn more about you?
Go to opensourcemarketer.com. I'm all there. Any way you want to contact me is available on that site.
Sweet. Roderick? Or Rod?
It's Roderick. And listen, I'm at roderick@lixad.com.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming on, doing this, and doing this test run. To the listener out there, Keith, everybody else, let me know what you guys think. If you like more of these episodes, leave a comment. It's mobileappchat.com/149. That's mobileappchat.com/149. Let me know what you think. Happy to continue doing this if this is something that you like. But if it's something that you rather not have, then it's less time for me. But thanks, guys. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Roderick. And I'll see you guys in the next chat.
Cheers.